Urban Meyer is now the Grand Poobah in Jacksonville. JP Shadrick, part of the Jags radio network. He does pre and post game. He hosts a bunch of shows during the week on everything Jags. JP, first off, a belated Happy New Year to you. Congrats on your, Alabama team winning the national title. It had been 3 long years after all. How are you?
There was some thin years in Tuscaloosa the last 3. I don't know how we ever got by, but somehow we made it back to another championship. I'm doing great, guys. It's good to be back with you. And we've got a lot to discuss, which is fairly new around here. That hasn't happened since the championship season, the AFC championship game season back in 2017. It's been a little while since we've had some relevance in Jacksonville.
There's no doubt. I said it earlier in the show, JP. It's Friday, where we don't have a lot of football Fridays left. We've got 4 monster games this weekend, and the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be the story that's talked about from coast to coast. That's never happened during the playoffs when the Jags aren't playing.
I went on probably, 700 radio stations last night across the country, 2 different national networks last night. And that hasn't happened since the AFC Championship game week. I mean, that's how big this is. And it's, that's not the big barometer of everything, but you get it. It is the top of mind story for the last 2 days in the NFL. And even after, I think the Jets hired Saleh last night, and they'll do all that stuff today, this is going to be the big one because it's the big name. I mean, he's one of the winningest coaches of all time in college football. And he's won 3 titles there and has the 3rd best winning percentage ever. I mean, it's not just, the hot new name out of college football. It's a guy that's going to go to the College Football Hall of Fame and has rings to back it up and has won everywhere he's been. He's never had a losing season. And his name has been linked with so many jobs over the years that he just didn't take for whatever reason. This was the one that was perfect for him because it is a clean slate and he can really build this organization in his likeness, which was the appealing part for Urban Meyer.
Well, JP, as best you can tell, either with what has been said in the office or what has already been released by the organization, I mean, does Urban handpick the general manager? Is this a Pete Carroll, John Schneider situation where John does all the day-to-day work, but at the end of the day, if it comes down as to who's picking who in the 3rd round, it's Pete Carroll's call. Therefore, it becomes Urban Meyer's call. I mean, how do we think this is going to go?
In my opinion, the GM will probably be announced, if it's not today, very soon. Shad Khan earlier this week had his press availability and basically said as such that, he thinks they have to be hired really close together because one has to know who the other is and vice versa. So in my mind, since Urban was announced last night, I think the GM is probably today. That's just my gut. I don't have any intel on that. And there were reports that Trent Baalke has been involved in the interview process of the head coaches as well. I'm curious what role that was. We might get a little intel to that today as well because Shad Khan is scheduled to talk at 11:30 today with Urban Meyer. Maybe they'll have a little more to give us on that front. So to answer your first question, I think Urban's the big name and the guy that's going to really build, I think, everything. It does feel, at least to me right now, that it is that almost Seattle build. The GM, Urban needs somebody that knows the league, that knows the rules of engagement in terms of player procurement and trading and all the rules that go with player personnel. He might not know all that stuff, obviously, because he hasn't been around the NFL. So he needs a strong person, in my opinion, that's been around and done it before. And I think that would be the good combination.
Trent Baalke, who was assistant GM, made interim GM when they got rid of the general manager during the course of the season. Baalke was also the Niners general manager with Harbaugh when they had the successful run that they had.
Now, the argument, too, there is that he didn't have some success at the end. I mean, it went well for a little while in San Francisco, and then it fell apart. in San Francisco as well. And we'll see. There's all those other candidate names that were involved in that as well. But just from the reporting we saw, Balky has been involved here, at least in a big part of this process. How deep that goes, I don't know. But in my opinion, like I said, I think it needs to be somebody who knows, who's played the game before and who knows how the game should be played, at least the rules of how to play the game, so things can run smoothly on that side.
All right. JP, when I looked at this, I looked at the Cons doing a great job. It looked as if they just basically, whether Urban was in Jacksonville or his agent was, but it looked as if the Chargers wanted him. And yesterday was D-Day for the Jags, and they didn't quit until they got him to sign. Is that kind of the way things went down?
A little bit, but the way I understand it, I don't know if that Charger stuff might have been somewhat real. I don't know how real it was. I don't think they were coming to the table with the open checkbook and the everything, and you're going to run everything here idea, in my opinion. This was the one for Urban. This was the one that I don't think he considered many of the other ones, even though he might have been reported to. It's my thought that it was pretty much Jacksonville all the way, because he's, him, like it's not like he just jumped into this thing off the top deck just to try it out. I mean, he's been studying this for a long time, probably since he left Ohio State or before that, studying the NFL in general, maybe not particularly Jacksonville, but when an opportunity like this comes, with an owner that he knows, by the way, they do have a history in the Big Ten circles there. Shad Khan is a big Illinois booster and contributor there, and Urban's history in the Big Ten. So they do have a relationship. The spark of where this started, I think they met at a Super Bowl either last year or 2 years ago and had some time there. I don't think they talked about this job, but I think just in general the conversation got going. And then here we go. Blank slate, draft picks, first overall pick, plenty of cap space, and the ability, it sounds like, to change the organization in the building and maybe some facilities upgrades down the line here to go with all this. It was the perfect job for Urban Meyer. And that's the only reason why he left the analyst chair at Fox Sports, in my opinion. It's that it's a job like this, and it's this opportunity. Any other ones, he'd still be analyzing Big Ten football next year.
Talking with JP Shadrick, part of the Jags Radio Network. He does pre and post game. He also does play-by-play on a couple of national outlets. You can follow JP on Twitter at JP Shadrick, JP Shadrick. Do you look at the Jags, and you're not from afar, obviously, you work in the building, but do you look at the Jags being in a similar situation as where the Dolphins were 2 years ago, where they tore it down? And essentially the Jags have already done that, but Jacksonville may actually enter 2021 in a slightly better situation than the Dolphins did in 2019, because you guys are going to have Trevor Lawrence in the building and the Dolphins didn't have a quarterback yet in the building, really. So do you look at the Jags and, you do a show with Pete Prisco and Tony Baselli. Are you looking at this kind of like, we're in the same situation Miami was in a year and a half ago, and look at what they've done in a year and a half, and we get a head start with Trevor Lawrence?
It's not a bad idea, right, to have Trevor Lawrence. I don't know. I think for me, to be competitive and be fighting for playoff spots and all that should come probably not this year, but in 2022, if they aren't fighting for wild cards at least, or the division, then there's something wrong, because this roster is so depleted, and it's not, even with the cap space and the draft picks and the equity in the draft and everything that this team has at their disposal this year, it is going to be really tough to go from where they were to where they need to be in this division, especially with Tennessee and Indy playing like they are, to get over the top of those two right away. You're going to have to build and figure out how to do that. I think it's going to take more than just 1 year to do that. But it does help when you have what many people think is a generational type quarterback coming out it, and there's really no other option for that type of level quarterback this year. That's part of the draw to get Urban here. That's part of what this organization is going to be, and everything will be built around him. Whatever makes that quarterback shine the brightest. So, to answer your question, I don't know if it's a quick fix 1 year, but it's pretty darn close, and it's going to be, a couple of years from now, if they're not competing, there's something going on that's wrong. But they've got a little bit of time to get this right. Remember, guys, they played 81 different players on the field this year.
Wow.
It's the second most in the league this year, right? It was the most in franchise history. And we expected some of that just because of the nature of the rosters this year and COVID and some things. But the Jaguars' issues were mostly, I'd say 80% injury related. They didn't have really much COVID outbreak on the regular roster, and they had a couple of instances late in the year. But they had 6 kickers that kicked for them this year because of injury, not because of COVID. They had 3 quarterbacks play because they didn't play well at all, and they had 2 punters. That was a COVID situation. You add that up, and then you're changing. You had like 11 different lineups in the secondary this year because of injury. Guys just going down week after week after week. No interior defensive line play. You had 2 guys opt out before the season that didn't even play. They were supposed to start for you in the interior defensive line. So they're so young, and they were so beat up last year that this is just not going to look anywhere close to the same next year. I would think there are 30 new players out of the 53 next season because it is a full rebuild. It's hard to have cohesion in the first year when you have that many new guys on a football team, and give it a year or so after that.
AP, there's a million questions I could ask you. I want to start with this one, and this is making you really wear the colors, and scream like I did at 6 this morning. JAGS, 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 Jags. Outside of Robinson, was there a bright spot? I mean, it's tough to find 1 in 15. But it looks like there's a running back there. Was there any other bright spots in this season other than the fact that it's over and Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer are coming to Jacksonville?
Well, it's a fair question. James Robinson was I'll give Doug Marrone and Dave Caldwell credit on that one. And I think Doug Marrone would probably get a lot of the credit on that one because that takes a lot of guts to cut a top 5 draft pick running back in favor of an undrafted guy who's never seen a field of the NFL. And to have it work like it did is really good for this organization moving ahead because at least you have that. Now, they need some other pieces at running back. They need a third down guy. They need like a speed guy. That's not James Robinson. He's not a home run hitter. DJ Chark did not have a great year. There was some talk before the season that maybe you extend him after this season and go ahead and get it done early, but I don't think that's going to come because the numbers weren't great for him this year. They didn't have a tight end play worth a darn. The offensive line was okay in the interior. There's some veteran guys there they thought played well, especially in the run game, as you could tell with James Robinson. Defensively, there's not a lot to hang your hat on. There's just not. Josh Allen was hurt, defensive end. Caleb Chason took a little time to develop. The last month he got better because he was playing more. Miles Jack moved outside, and he had his best year as a pro. Joe Schobert was like 4th in the league in tackles, but a lot of them are 10, 15 yards down the field. There's not a lot. There's just not. And that's why after 1 in 15, it's just time to forget about 2020 and move forward with a brand new slate.
It is stunning to think where that Jags defense was 3 years ago with everybody so young and so good. And to think that outside of Miles Jack, everybody else is gone. It is stunning and sad, really, what happened to what was shaping up as the next great defense in the league. JP, from the people that you've talked to who have played in the NFL or coached in the NFL in the last few days, because it's not like Urban and the Jags weren't, in the same sentence, until yesterday. What are their reservations about him and coaching in the NFL? His style. Okay. He was tough on college guys. Well, it's if you're tough on college guys, the pros are going to look at you and go, "I'm not exactly buying the way you're selling this." Plus, the difference between Saturdays and Sundays. What are the Pete Priscos, the Tony Basellis, the people that you work with and talk to? What are their concerns, if any, about Urban on Sundays?
I think you got to remember too that most of this roster is young. It's not like they have 15-year veteran players on the Jaguars team. I think the oldest player this past year was probably an 8th-year player. It's not like they have a bunch of veteran guys who are going to say, like, who the heck is Urban Meyer? Like, all these guys know exactly who Urban Meyer is and his track record of success at the college level. And that will get him the first meeting or the first week of meetings, whatever. Okay, there's credibility here. But at some point that will wane, because what can Urban Meyer do to help me become a better football player and help us become a better football team? And that's where the difference will lie, I think. When does that rubber meet the road? And, can he adjust to somebody who's getting paid to do this and getting paid very well to do this? So I don't, he said that, they're going to treat the players great here in Jacksonville, right? That's the idea for Urban Meyer. But they're also going to grind them and try to get them better and all that. But I think there's been a history around this organization as of late where, as we all know, it was a national story that a lot of guys wanted out of here because of the way they felt they were being treated or the contracts or whatever the issue was. And even the Players Association, remember, put out that statement about Tom Coughlin when that came to a head a couple of years ago. That perception needs to go away, because I think that's the whole thing. This is going to be a totally different feel of how the organization treats players and puts them where they should be. They are the reason why we're out there playing football games, and I think he will recognize that and adjust, because I think he's adjusted to different things everywhere he's been. This might be one of those adjustments you haven't seen yet because he hasn't had to do it. But as you guys know, Urban, like he'll be able to. I think he's going to be able to manage that. Let's just put it that way.
All right, this has nothing really to do with the team, but it has to do with their fan base. We all know that Jacksonville is Gator country. And Gator fans shouldn't, JP, but I know you know this. They don't like Urban. They feel that it is the weirdest. So I mean, he only gave him a couple of natties, and they hate the guy. They really do. Deep down, the Gator fan feels that he shunned them, and they don't like him. And then there's the other part. Outside of the state of Georgia, there are no more Georgia Bulldogs in any one place on the planet than Jacksonville, Florida. This just in, Georgia hates Florida kind of a lot. So just from a PR standpoint, while this is a huge coup, and the Jags fans all in, the Jags fan that's also a Gator fan, the Jags fan that's also a Dog fan, how are they going to handle this?
I think he'll handle it well if he wins 10 games. I think that'll go away.
But he ain't going to win 10 games next year, JP. We both know that.
I know, yeah. But at some point, he will. Hopefully, that's the idea. You win 10 games, you get to the playoffs. I mean, that's okay. Then things are fine. If you don't win 10 games, you go to the playoffs, things aren't fine. We know that well here. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. I get it's a Florida town. I get that Florida State's 2 hours away, Georgia, all those people, whatever. But when the Jaguars are hot and good, they outdraw all of them in terms of ratings and television eyeballs, and not ticket sales because it's different, obviously. But it is a Jaguars town. I know it's strange to hear it from the outside, but when the Jags are relevant, it is a Jags town. And you can be an Urban hater and a Florida fan and all this, but on Sunday, if they're hot and they're playing well and he has a big reason to do with it, I think they're going to support the Jaguars. That's just what it is. So I understand there has been criticism of Urban over the last couple of stops, the way he left those stops. I know there were health reasons, but there was some other off-the-field stuff at both places. and a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth because of that kind of stuff. But hey, this is a different opportunity now, and I'm not going to judge him until I really get to sit down a long time with him and meet him. And I think Jaguar fans, if he has a good approach here and puts the best foot forward and goes and tries to win football games and does that, I don't think the Florida or Georgia or Florida State aspect is going to come into it much.
Well, JP, we're happy for you because, as you said on Twitter yesterday, you've been with the organization 9 years, and outside of that run in January of 2018, there 3 years ago, this is the most exciting thing that has happened in your time there. And our next guest, Pat Kerwin, has always said in the NFL, you need to produce two things, either winning or hope. And JP, you and that organization now have an awful lot of hope. Congratulations on everything that befell you in the last year. Stay safe, stay healthy, and JP, we'll talk again between now and the draft, okay?
Hope is a good thing, guys. Maybe the best of things. And it's been a long time. It's great to talk to you guys.
Thanks, JP.